Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining us here for another episode, wherever in the world you're listening from, whatever platform you guys are listening to us on. Thank you guys so much. Thanks for the support, kind messages, emails, tweets, things you send on Instagram, all that great stuff. Thank you for that. Keep that coming, and appreciate you guys checking this episode out as well. We're going to dive into some X's and O's today, talking specifically about sets and the use of sets and how my guest implements them, uses sets effectively, and the way that he kind of puts those sets into action against different types of defenses. So this will be pretty fun. I love getting to talk a little bit of X's and O's and some sets with basketball as well. So I'm excited to pick my guest's brain here. My guest is the head girls basketball coach at Carvers Bay High School. Coach Logan Kingsbury is joining us today. Coach, appreciate you coming on. How are you doing?
I'm great. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, absolutely, Coach. Excited to get into this. So let's start with you and your journey, the game of basketball and your coaching journey. Where did the game take you that ultimately led you to Carvers Bay?
So I'm a pretty young head coach. You know, I'm 24 years old.
Nice.
I come kind of from a basketball family, I guess. My dad was a McDonald's All-American, played college basketball at the University of Iowa. He kind of bounced around, you know, professionally for a little bit, and then ended up, he's now a banker in Nebraska. So, but obviously we were raised as basketball, you know, from the time we could walk, we had a basketball. So, it's always kind of been a part of my life. My brother's now at the University of Iowa playing. So, I mean, it still goes on, and I coach. So played in high school, you know, won a couple state championships, loved it. Decided not to play in college. I could have went in NAIA D2. I just, for whatever reason at the time, you know how you are. Hindsight's 2020. But then I kind of missed basketball, so I got into coaching. Was an assistant at Ponca, my school I graduated from, for a year, and then I went to Lincoln Northeast for a year as an assistant, both boys. And I kind of got out of school, and I was looking for a teaching and coaching job. Kind of anywhere in the country, I didn't really care, and Carvers Bay came open, had a great interview, and I mean the rest is kind of history.
So you were just ready to take that chance anywhere, so to speak. That's awesome. I love when people have that like freedom and they can just be like, you know what, I'm just gonna go for it because I can. And it sounds like you're in a great spot. And from what you said before we started recording, it sounds like you guys had a really solid year last year, looking to run some things back this year.
Yeah, I mean for year one, you know, I mean, you never really know. You know, you come into a situation and everybody's going to tell you, you know, this girl's great or this kid's great or the team could be really good, but you don't really know until you get there. And I mean, you know, we had some growing pains for sure. I mean, throughout the season, and we'll probably get into a little bit some of that later, but it was a really good first year. I mean, over 20 wins was the most in school history. We won our region and made a run in the playoffs to the Elite Eight. So, I mean, we should have another great year. I'm excited.
Fantastic. That's awesome, Coach. I wanted to talk to you about, before we get into our topic, about something you're passionate about, which is giving great experiences to your players off the court. So I wanted you to talk a little bit about the experiences that you give your players and also the inspiration behind some of the things that you do for your players off the court.
Well, I just think that sometimes coaches or administration or parents sometimes miss the mark on thinking that if kids are given too many like cool experiences, or, you know, maybe it could be travel gear or, you know, different things, that it's kind of spoiling them. But for me, if your program's run right, I mean, if they're showing up to work every day, you know, they're working hard, they're doing the things they should be doing, that should be rewarded, you know. And so that's why we do so much. I mean, my kids, you think about it, they're working out, playing games, whatever, probably 10 months out of the year. At least. I mean, if you think about it, through summer, through the season, I mean, they're putting in tons of hours. So why shouldn't they be rewarded? And then with the traveling and stuff, which is what we do a lot of, I mean, we went to Tennessee this summer, to the University of Tennessee for 5 days. I mean, some of our kids had never been, out of our state. They've never seen mountains. I mean, they've never seen different cultures and things. So, I mean, I think that's our job as coaches, is to try and give them all the experiences they can. So when they graduate, they have a better idea of what the world is like versus living in just your little bubble. So, I mean, we do a lot of traveling. I mean, from all over the state of South Carolina to now we're going out of state to Tennessee, and we'll continue to do that. So I think it's very, very important, and that some coaches, we just don't do enough of it. I think we need if you can do it, you got to.
And I wanted to ask you to follow up on that about what was that experience like for the camp that you went to for a few days out in Tennessee? How was that experience? I imagine it had to have been a big bonding experience among all the basketball stuff that you guys did, to bringing your team together.
I mean, first off, University of Tennessee, like their staff and everything was first class. Like we toured the facilities. They let us watch practices. I mean, the players were interacting with our girls. I mean, it was really cool. And their facilities are obviously top notch. I mean, and it's one of the few schools, that they have a good boys basketball team, but like their women's basketball teams, Pat Summit and all that. I mean, it's historic. So that we got to see Pat Summit stuff, tour the facilities, went to the Women's Basketball Hall of Fame, which is in Knoxville. And then we just did a bunch of other bonding stuff, bowling and going out to eat and doing arcades and all this different stuff that, I mean, our girls loved. I mean, it was a really fun trip. And yeah, the team bonding, I mean, that's what it's all about. I mean, you want to build relationships and help them build relationships with each other. And it will help on the court. I mean, at the end of the day, if they trust each other, love each other, I mean, it's going to translate to the court. So it was a great trip.
Yeah, I find those experiences really help during the season when you're in a tough stretch or in a tight spot, to have a team that sticks together and works together, because they had those bonding experiences earlier. So I'm sure that's going to pay off in crunch time in those situations. So I want to, as we kind of get into the idea of talking about sets, you, I believe, mentioned that there's not too many coaches in maybe your area or in your region that you see who use a lot of sets, and you are very much into sets. Can you talk a little bit about why you really enjoy using sets, and why sets are something that you find really important for you and your program?
Well, I mean, one thing is where I came from. I mean, we talked about at the beginning about I'm from the Midwest. And I mean, there's just a lot of coaches in the Midwest. We use a lot of sets. We do flares and cross screens and ball screens and, all sort flex and all sorts of different stuff. It wasn't as prevalent in girls basketball when I got down here. Like there just wasn't as many coaches doing it. Like boys basketball down here is a little bit different. You're going to see more, okay, for whatever reason that is. But in girls basketball, I mean, we would play teams that just didn't have plays. You know what I mean? I mean, now they were great players. There were some phenomenal players we played against, but I mean, they'd kind of just spread it out, 5 out and just attack, which there's nothing wrong with that. But for me, you don't want to overkill it with the sets, because you want to have them have freedom to play. But at the same time, as a coach, I think it's your job and responsibility to, I mean, help them get an easy bucket here or there. I mean, and that's the whole point of a set. I mean, a set play, you should be able to get an easy bucket. I mean, that's the goal, and they have to trust it. I mean, when I got here, my girls, they had 2 plays, I think, the year before I got here, and so when I came in, obviously, I'm trying to put in a bunch of plays. Well, at first they were very hesitant, because it's new. It's something they've never experienced. By the end of the season, I mean, they're wanting more. We probably had about 15, 16, plays. Probably about 13 of those are sets, and then a few motions or continuity offenses. But I mean, by the end of the year, we were clicking. I mean, it was easy. And I mean, this year we just want to expand more. I mean, more options. You don't want to overkill it, because I've seen coaches that do too much, too much control over it, trying to have a set every play, kind of like Purdue in college men's basketball. I mean, they're running a set every single play, and that's hard to do. But I mean, if you can help your team get an easy bucket here or there, I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't, I guess. And sometimes I think it might just be because, the coach doesn't want to spend the time it takes to work on it, because it's a lot of work, getting the timing and everything down. So, I mean, we've done a great job, me and my staff, of really helping them learn why we're doing it. And it's
Sure,
been
yeah.
very successful.
Yeah, I think that the why is a big piece, especially coming in, putting in sets, being a new coach. I mean, there was probably a big part of you who kind of had to prove yourself to your players, and that trust, like you mentioned, right, was not immediately given to you. You really had to earn it and really explain it to them. And I think that had to have helped once they knew that you could effectively explain why this set was useful and what the purpose of it was.
Yeah, I mean, it's all the relationship has to come first. I mean, that's the reality. I mean, when I got here, I want to put in all this stuff. Well, that doesn't work like that. I mean, you got to build that relationship, build that trust. And as the summer goes on, the trust gets better. Maybe you can put some more stuff in, but you don't want to rush it because you have to build the relationship, build the foundation, all that first. Because
Yep.
otherwise, why would they believe?
Yeah,
But
no.
as the season went on, we did a really good job with that.
So let me talk with you a little bit about the makeup of your team a little bit, and then how did kind of the makeup of your team kind of lead into the sets that you created for them, or did you have these sets kind of ready to go regardless of kind of the makeup of your team?
Well, it's funny because when you're a first time head coach, you've been an assistant under some very good coaches. So I mean, you have all these ideas that what you would do and what you want to do. Well, the reality is, I mean, if you're a good coach, you're going to adjust to what your players are. I mean, like I'm going to run man to man. That's what I do on defense, probably regardless of who I got. Okay, because I believe in it. But on offense, I mean, if I don't have a shooter, why am I putting in all this stuff with flares? You know what I mean? So I kind of had to take a step back after the first month or so I was here and be like, okay, what are we very good at and what can we build on? So, I mean, like our team, we have an all-state post.
Mm,
She's 6 foot. She can play
wow.
on the wing, but I mean, she's dominant inside. Has offers, a bunch of D2s, some D1 JUCOs. I mean, she's really got some good looks. So how can we get her the ball? I mean, if you have an all-state player, you got to find ways to get her the ball easy. I also do have some shooters who have really this season, I'm looking to put in some more stuff for the shooters because they got a lot better over the summer. But I had some shooters last year. Got to find ways to get them easy looks because I mean that's the whole goal. I have a slasher. She's very very good. I got to find ways where put her in a position for success. So I think as a coach, you got to look at your team as a whole. You can't really make preconceived notions beforehand, I guess, because you have to learn your team and then adjust. So everything I thought I was going to do, threw that out the window pretty much, and kind of started from scratch with my assistants, and we put in some stuff that really worked well.
Well, I was gonna say if I had a bunch of sets in mind, and I was drawing up sets of what to do, being a girls basketball coach myself, I don't think I would be making sets with the assumption I would have a great post player. That's not something I think would even,
Right,
cross my mind. And then you see that, like,
right.
whoa, okay, wait a minute. This has completely changed the complexion of everything. No, that's funny. So let's talk about the some of the sets that you like to run. So with the makeup of your team and knowing some things about it, what were some of the initial sets? What were some of like the day one things that you wanted to put in right away for your sets that you put in?
I mean, so for me, it's different a little bit because you got to learn your team. So they had never had a lot of plays. So for sure, like this year, there's going to be a little bit of a jump. We're going to try and do some more, maybe a little bit more complex, but simple is usually better. So I mean, we put in some very basic sets early. Like a simple cross screen. I mean, move the ball, get some ball movement, but I mean, screen the middle of the zone or screen their man, come across. And I mean, that works all the time. I mean, it's such a simple thing that you'd think that every single team in the country would run something like that, right? But they don't. So it's hard for teams to defend it sometimes. They don't get screened down low as much because now with Steph Curry and everything, Caitlin Clark, we're seeing a lot more flares because we want to shoot. Everybody wants to shoot threes. So for us, we did a lot of diagonal screens, cross screens to get our posts open, and I mean, and get our ISO'd one-on-one on the block, and we had a lot of success with that. And then we did do some ball screening, the zone, because I said I run man to man. 99.999% of the girls teams I will face run zone. So that was an adjustment for
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
I had to learn, like, okay, I'm used to everybody running man. Everybody here runs zone. So I had to go find some stuff that would work. I mean, And screening the zone, I got my dad's best friends from Hamilton, Ohio, and he always told me screen the zone. Okay, screen the zone. So we screen the zone a ton. We screen the middle, we ball screen the top. Sometimes I think teams get too comfy in the continuity, versus a 2-3 versus a 1-3-1, where you just kind of rotate. There's a motion. If you screen that zone, they're usually not ready for it because so many teams don't do it. And it makes it much more difficult to guard. And then really what happens is what we all want. You turn the zone into a man. You get one-on-one matchups, and your better players are going to win.
And let me ask you as a follow-up to that about the screening part. You're putting in the screen here against the zone. Talk to me about what goes into a good screen. Is that something that you had to teach, or did your players already kind of have that skill set in?
No, and I mean, I'm not gonna lie, we still got to get better because
Yeah,
I was losing this summer about
okay.
moving screens, and
I brought up
because
some bad memories.
they're hitting them now because at
Okay.
first they didn't want to screen, like they just screen an area, not a body. So we had to teach you have to screen a body. Well, now we're hitting bodies, which is perfect. Which is what you want. We're getting a little moving. So we got to get a little bit better, a little more disciplined at that. But let me tell you, it's way better when they're screening bodies and getting moving screen than when they screen nobody. So, I mean, yes, the answer to that is yes. We have to work on it. We had to work on it right away, and we have to continue working on it because it's something so simple that I think sometimes people think you don't have to work on it. And the reality is those are the things. The little things are what you have to work on.
Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, especially if you got shooters, right, that you're trying to get open, trying to get them a good clean look, like that screen is everything, making sure that they got all the space that they need and that off ball screen's being set where it needs to be.
Yep.
So what else do you is there, I guess to reword this question, what are like in your sets, are there any like core actions that kind of run through all of your sets? Are there things that you're consistently, I know you mentioned ball screens, but are there other things that you're consistently either looking for or always, or pretty much always try and do when you're putting your sets in and running them?
There's one thing that I've started doing much more of that I didn't do right away because I told you I wanted to keep it simple. So
Sure.
Everything we did at first was so simple, but then as I've kind of watched film and watched how we progress, I realized there's too much standing. I want to keep it simple, but there was too much standing. So pretty much always we're getting movement from everybody off ball. Like there's never going to be somebody that's just standing still, and we're going to keep working on that because if you have multiple things going on, the defense won't stare at the ball. I mean, and what the problem is, if you have a kid just spot up in the corner and just stand there the whole time, a lot of the times they're not going to be open and their defender is going to be right and help. So if we get movement going away from where we want the ball to go to, that's really one of the big things. I have the person in the corner usually goes opposite just to get, because all it takes is the defense to freeze for a second. So we get them running hard opposite, and we're coming back the other way. And it might be a double screen to come off the backside or whatever. But a lot of the times we're using the action off the back to open up the post that we want to get the ball to. So we get the whole defense flowing this way. They think a three's coming this way. They think something's coming this way. And then boom, we got the one-on-one post up with the defense out of position.
I imagine that had to have taken time to put in because I know sometimes we'll struggle with off ball movement and teaching it with players who I find a lot of them don't really know, they'll move without the ball, but they're not really moving purposefully. And I think that maybe,
Bingo.
they'll move, they'll do something, they'll do. But I think one of the nice things I think about sets though is it gives some purposeful movement to players. So they know, okay, like if I don't have the ball, like I know I should be doing this, or this is what I'm trying to do, or this is a goal I'm trying to achieve versus, just moving to move somewhere, right?
Well, that's the thing. Like that's one reason too why I love sets, because they understand exactly why they're doing what they're doing. Versus like we struggled this summer in Tennessee because every team ran man to man, which we don't face. So we were running our man to man stuff, and they struggled if we go 5 out cutting with purpose or screening with purpose because they don't face it. So it's really good for us to go there and see a different style of basketball. But that's something we struggle with, if we're just running a 5-out motion or whatever it may be, because they don't always understand why am I doing this? Or they pass and cut, but they don't cut with a purpose. So sets gives us that opportunity to kind of teach that this is why you're doing it. So this will make this person open. This will shift the defense that way. And that's really why I like running sets like that, because it just makes it more purposeful.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that it's one of those things where I think, and I think there's a lot of different philosophies about it, but for something with specifically about off-ball movement, I kind of imagine you put in some action, you put in some things, give your players directions of what to do without the ball, and then once they've kind of built that up, or have like a library of things that they know they can do without the ball, then if you kind of open things up and have a little bit more freedom, they at least already kind of have that understanding of some things they should be doing without the ball. And so you kind of start with the sets for that, and then like you can sort of, as you wish, if you want, just kind of release them a little bit, and at least they'll have some background knowledge now about what they should be doing.
Exactly. Well, and that's the whole thing. You want to be able to, the end goal is that you release them. Like, I want my point guard this summer started calling plays. She would call a set if she wanted it. And I want that, because if she can identify what the defense is doing and can call a play, I mean, that's what you want. You want your players to know, oh, they're in this defense. We're going to run this play because it will be open. So you want to take the reins off. You want to let them go. And it just takes time, because they have to get confident with it. And I mean, year 2 hopefully will be better. And I know it won't be perfect, but we just keep building on it every day. Get 1% better every day, and it'll work out.
Talk to me about your working in your post player, when you have a post player like that, and you need to get her looks, I know, and you got to make sure she's touching the ball. So what in your set actions, how did you kind of plan your sets around using her and her skill set effectively?
Well, you got, like I said earlier, we space a lot of zone, which,
Yep.
I mean, it makes it a little bit trickier, versus the traditional man-to-man where you're going to get a ton of one-on-one looks. Now, they might collapse on her, but you're going to get a lot more one-on-one situations. So the biggest thing for me and my assistants when we're kind of talking about this is, how can we make it man-to-man? Like, how can we get it in a situation where there's not 2-3 girls around her? So, I mean, and that's kind of where it comes into screening and those things. But one thing that we really had to work on that you wouldn't think about is how do we get the ball in? You can do all this stuff to get her open. You can screen the middle of the zone. You can screen up and have her flash. You can try and get high-low looks, which we do a lot of, because I have the all-state girl, but I got 4 other girls that are 5'10" and above that are very good. I mean, and they're really growing. So, I mean, it's not just her they have to worry about. So we have situations with high lows and those things. And entry passes is one of the most crucial things in basketball that you kind of take it for granted if your team's good at it. Okay. And we struggle with it because you might get them, everything's perfect situation, but she puts her hand low and they throw it high. Well, turnover. I mean, like, just those things. So we had to drill that, and we still have to drill that over and over and over again, because it's just a level of discipline. You have to teach your guards how to read. Okay, she's going to put her hand, if her hand's here, I throw it there. Like, it sounds simple, but if they were never taught that prior, then you have to take the time to build on that and get better at it.
Well, especially if that's not an action that they do often, right? Like if they're not
Right.
being asked, a lot to have to make that pass or get that pass in there, like it's not going to be something they're probably that comfortable with. And right, to your point, you would hate to run this, nice set and get open and get space, and then just have the entry pass be completely fumbled, and then the whole set's ruined and the whole action's like just all for nothing, so to speak.
Exactly.
So with with the sets that you run, I was curious about, you face so much zone. Do the teams that you play are do they make adjustments to that? Do they never go to man on it, or are they sticking to like a 2-3, a 1-2-1? Like what are they kind of doing, if anything, in terms of like the chess match defensively.
Well, and that's the thing is so many of these teams, okay, it's either going to be a full court press and try and trap and, slap and grab and make it go up tempo, which we're fine with. We want to get it. We'll break it, shoot layups, or we'll break it and set something up. And we've gotten a lot better at that. But a lot of what they do is a 2-3-1-2-2, and they pack it, which obviously makes it difficult on your post. So that's where we've got most teams try to adjust. But I would say that one thing we do a good job of is you get a little wrinkle off of your set. You know what I mean? So we have very simple play where all it is there's a person cuts through on the wing, we kick it down to the corner, and there's just a screen in the middle, for her to come across to the block. Well, obviously what they're going to start doing is cheating that play, cheating the screen. So a simple wrinkle that we have, okay, is we call through, which is the play, but we have it with a twist. So if I'm yelling twist, and we got to get better at this, but the screener will just flash to the high post. And what's going to happen is she's going to be wide open. So she'll screen the middle and flash high, and she's going to be wide open for a bucket, or they'll fly out for a high-low. I mean, so a lot of the things I have to adjust after they adjust, but that's what you do as a coach. I mean, you always got to have something to kind of counter it once they start cheating it.
Yeah. You would hope that, I just would hope that there would be something that they would understand, at least take away that initial action, or take away if they get beat, once or twice on the same look or the same action. You would think hopefully they would take that away, and then, they do something and not just stick to the same zone, which is that I'm glad there's some things I'll take away there. So I've always been curious about when you're refining your sets in practice and going over your sets in practice, how do you make it meaningful practicing your sets when it's really easy, I know, for players to just kind of go for the motion, or for, the defense to not really, give full effort. How do you kind of work through your sets in your practice and actually make it meaningful and get something out of it?
So we go over them every day. My high school coach was like this, so we do this too. We go over them all every day on air. I mean, we start every day pretty much with that. Now, by the beginning of the season, it takes way too long, and once we get rolling in the season, it's quick. I mean, it's not going to take more than maybe 3-4 minutes tops. We're going to rip through them all, boom, boom, boom. I don't call them; the point guard just calls them all out. But that obviously, you will get girls that go through the motions, especially once they get it. I mean, they're just going to start. So you got to turn it into competitive. I mean, and we did a good job of that last year, but we got to do an even better job this year, making sure we're giving our offense the look that the defense is going to give us. So if we're going to play a team, and that's where film comes in. If we're going to play a team that's running an aggressive 1-2-2, then we have to practice those plays versus an aggressive 1-2-2, which, as you know, high school, sometimes that's hard because you might not have 10, 12, 11, 12 girls that can all give a good look, right? But you have to try and simulate it. So whether it's 5-on-5 or whether you break it down where you might just work on the cross screen, drill it where you're working on the cross screen with a person guarding the corner and they got to make the pass. Or if it's a flare screen, you just work on hitting that flare screen and making that pass. You just got to drill it competitively and tell the defense you want stops. It sucks when they cheat the plays, and every coach hates when they cheat the plays. But the offense has to learn how to adjust because, like you said earlier, you would think the defense is going to figure out the play eventually. So the offense has to figure out then, how do I counter that? So, I mean, that's why I don't get as mad. Like my high school coach would get mad sometimes if we cheat plays and stuff like that. But I don't get as mad because our offense has to figure out, what do I do? If they're cheating that flare screen, then the person that set the screen probably is going to be open if they roll back. Just things like that we're getting better at, but we for sure have. That's an area where we have a ton of room to grow, is them making the adjustment on their own, versus me calling a timeout to say, hey, do this, them identifying it and making the adjustment.
And I know, if speaking from experience, that I've had some interesting experiences with some set plays where players will get so locked into the action of the set that they'll forget about the objective of like scoring in the basket because they're so focused on seeing the set or seeing the play all the way through.
Yep.
Is that something you've dealt with where they're too rigid and then they don't like have they don't deviate at all even when they should be?
100%. Especially as, like I told you, we got a little more, and this isn't super complex, but as we went a little more deep, like we started so simple, but as we got more deep, when there's more options, you know, I had a play where it's first a 2-3, it's a ball screen, and all you want is an overload on that side, on the right side. You want to get an overload where you have numbers, but she's going to come hard off that screen, and really what she wants to do is to kick it back so we have the overload. But one time she drove off that screen and she could have shot a layup, but she thought, I got to run the play, I got to
Yep.
run it all the way through, so she kicked it back, turnover. Because they cheated the play.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that, I
yeah.
mean, those are those teachable moments. I mean, where you got to let them know, hey, this isn't like you have to do it this way every single time. There has to be a level of freedom to it where they understand, if I can score, go score. You know?
Yeah, you have to you know, and I've had conversations with players who I think, whether it's consciously or unconsciously, when I had some teams where I put in a lot of sets and we ran a lot of sets as a program, where I think unconsciously some of my players maybe thought that like we didn't trust them and like or like we didn't have confidence in them to make their own decisions, and so they wouldn't want to like break out of that mold at all because in a way like they probably thought we didn't trust them or didn't believe in them. But I had to have actual explicit conversations with players like, no, like we do trust you, like if you see this, like do this. If you have a advantage somewhere, like don't pass open a wide open layup to kick it out if you have a wide open layup, sort of thing. And so it's just interesting that each player kind of has their own like kind of belief on whether or not they got to run it and see it all the way through, or if they feel like their coach trusts them enough to do something on their own if they see it.
Yeah,
Did oh, okay, go
you
ahead.
run into the same, you run into the same thing everywhere with that. I think
uh
is that some players are gonna feel that way. Like, why are you trying to run all these sets? Why are you trying to, um, you know, just not handcuff you, but kind of, why are you trying to do that? Especially if they've never been taught that before.
mhm.
So, and I kind of had to teach them that, no, I was like, this is high level basketball. You kind of got to teach it like that. Like, if you can do these things, this is what, go watch TV, go watch college basketball, go watch NBA, WNBA. Like, this is what you do. Like, if you can master this stuff, nobody will beat you. And everybody has to understand their role, their assignment, and there has to be discipline. And I mean, I think most players, if you kind of break it down like that, or like you said, kind of have that conversation, I mean, they'll come around to it. It might not be right away, but I do
Mhm.
think if you break it down, like there's a reason and a purpose for everything we're doing, they'll come around.
Yeah, no, I know 100%, absolutely. um what goes into the in your practices, or whether it's training that you do, getting your players skill development in the areas where they need to be effective in your set? So do you do any sort of work with your players where they're maybe specifically getting shots up from an area where they would in their set, or if there's certain actions that they would do maybe individually that fit into your set? Do you train or have your players do things that way, or do you not like really do individual skill work or training with that sort of thing in mind?
No, we absolutely do. And it's an
Mhm.
area though that we as a staff, and we've talked about it, we need to grow this year. Like, that needs to be more of an emphasis on the drills we do, and the skill development we do needs to be geared fully towards what we do on offense. And I think sometimes, we kind of lose sight of that. We kind of just try to do, these drills because we did those drills, when we were kids or whatever. Like, and there's always good drills. Like, ball handling drills are good. Like, there's drills that are always going to be good. Rebounding drills are good. But like when you're doing a shooting drill, or working with the posts and those things, you should, I think, drill it to the point of this is, and explain it to them. This is what it would look like on this play. This is simulating this play. And we did that a little bit more this summer, and I'm going to continue growing on it as we go out throughout the year, because if you teach them the whole purpose thing again, the why, they're probably going to be more willing to do it. Like, oh, I see. I'm doing this because it's simulating this play, versus if we're just shooting around, if we're just shooting, they might think, some of them might go through the motions. Versus if I say, I want you to practice this because this is you on this play. So you need to get very good at doing this because you're going to get this look. They might go a little bit harder. They might try a little bit more because there's a purpose, there's a why.
Yeah, I brought that up because I was thinking about a coach who I had a conversation with once who was telling me a story about the certain set that they run and how one of the looks they can get out of it is a corner three. And then he talked about how his player, when they're warming up or they're doing skill work or anything like that, or they're getting shots up, never shoots a corner three. They'll shoot threes from everywhere else, but they don't shoot from a corner three, where that they don't even work on that at all until he had to explicitly say it to him. And it was just one of those funny things. And I was like, yeah, that is funny. Like, you would think if this action's supposed to get you this look in the corner, maybe you want to get some shots up in the corner when you're on the gun or something. But, sometimes you got to have that conversation with your players and actually tell them that, or otherwise, that's really funny. Do you have a set, because you talked about seeing pressure and teams like to press a lot? Do you have a certain set or certain action that you look for immediately out of your press break? I know everyone has their press breakers, but is there an immediate maybe set you like to go into out of a press break, or do you just kind of see like what's available and just kind of work for your sets that way?
So for us last year, we really, all we had was, the classic. We want to get to the middle. We want to send the wings flying and get it down the court. If it's a zone, assuming it's a zone press. And we really, the biggest thing for us last year is we want our post, or whoever is in as the post, you got to run. As soon as you get the opportunity, you got to sprint back to the block. And a lot of times we're going to have an easy end. It's simple, but it worked a lot for us. This year, though, we are looking to have a little bit more of a, hey, we beat the press. Okay, I'm looking kind of to have more of a, we did it in high school. You beat it, you get them kind of calm down, and you get hit with a quick ball screen coming off with a flex screen on the bottom and a girl coming out for three. Okay, if we don't get it, we back up. But that's something, because while we do face a lot of zone, if a press is beaten, it's a scramble period. They're scrambling back. And a lot of times what it looks like, man, for that little 5-10 second period, they're scrambling, kind of seeing who's where. So I kind of want to see this year if we can implement where we're going to beat it. Okay. And it's going to be boom. Ball screen coming off the flex action with a three coming off the backside, and we don't get it. No problem, because the defense is calmed down then, and we can set up what we want to run. But that's one thing that I'm looking to kind of expand upon in year two, I guess, because one thing you don't want to do year one is put too much in. I think that's absolutely a mistake some coaches make too, is we put too much in because it's going to work. But if it's too much too soon, it doesn't do you any good.
Yeah. Overload. You can definitely overload your players with information, and then they become like very, like frozen almost, because like they're trying to go through the catalog in their brain, right, of what am I like it's like a big loading screen above them, and yeah, we certainly don't want to do that. And I think that it's what it sounds like you're doing, and I'll let you correct me if I'm mistaken, though, is kind of like more of a slower rollout, or you kind of have your building things, your absolute musts, and then kind of adding layers or maybe adding some new stuff in as you come into this next year.
Absolutely. Yes. And they know that. We understand that it's a process, so, and as coaches, sometimes we have to slow down. You have to go to the pace of your teams. You want to push them. You absolutely want to push them and see how much they can absorb. But at the same time, don't get ahead of yourself. So yeah, that's exactly what we're doing, me and my staff. And we're doing a very good job, I think, right now of pacing and getting this stuff in, and we got a goal. You always have a goal of, by this point, I hope we're here. Okay, if we're not, we have to adjust. But the goal is to get us to here so we can do this and just continue to build. By year two, we'll have these things down. By year 3, hopefully have a few more things down and just continue building to where it's a program. It's a true program.
Yeah, and then I mean that would be the best part, right? Is then they come in, or by the time, especially they're upperclassmen, they got the whole catalog down, and then they know everything that's supposed to be happening, and you got a bunch of coaches on the floor, so to speak. That would be the dream.
Exactly.
So obviously you are in a really great position, like we kind of mentioned before, where you have a post player and a talented one, and got to get a lot of work with that post player and put them in your sets. What advice would you give to coaches for what to maybe think about using their post players for, even if they're not like traditional bigs or traditional post players? What have you found? What do you think would be good for a coach to do to just work in the post and work in some post action in their sets?
I mean, the biggest thing for me is, and my team, like I said, we have very good guards, but we have my all-state post, but we have a bunch of other posts too that play a lot that are very good too. So you got to find ways to maximize their success too. Because what's going to happen is if you have that stud, that all-state post, who are they looking for? Every single time they're looking at her. So you got to find ways to utilize your other posts to get easy buckets. If they're going to all collapse on Jershelle for me, then Journey or Tiaja or my other girls, they have to be able to make a play. And one thing, like I've talked about a couple times throughout this, is my posts are getting much better and continue to improve on screening with purpose. And then what do you do after the screen? Because I think so many posts, whether it's a ball screen, cross screen, flare screen, they screen, okay, they can get that part down, but then they stand there, or then they slowly roll. Or so the big step for us now is, okay, we got screening down, we can screen hard. What is the next step? Okay, is it a roll back? Is it a fade? There's so many different things, and that's the next step is, why am I screening? What's the next play? What's the next thing I need to do? Because a lot of the times those screeners, it's a lazy roll, or it's I screen and stand, or all those things. And that they don't realize. Sometimes I think I'm just a screener. No, every single role, every single person is very important. And that's kind of what you have to get across to them, is those post girls that maybe aren't your number one go-to. Okay, you are still extremely important. Like, we have to have you, and we want you to score. Okay, but that means you got to screen hard, and you got to make a roll hard. You have to flare back hard. And that's kind of the difficult thing, I think, when you have a lot of posts, is they all just want to post up on the block. Well, you can't all post up on the block, so you have to get really, really good at whatever those other things are.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point to kind of mention, the fact that if you running sets, players can maybe, whether they think about it or not, kind of lock themselves into like, oh, this is all I do in a set, or this is my only role, and like, this is all I am. I'm not expected to do more than that. And that's a big trap that I think you could kind of find your players in, where they kind of put themselves in a box, and we want to, and it sounds like that's something you're kind of aware of, and trying to make sure that they don't box themselves in with a certain role or certain, this is all I do sort of thing.
Yeah, and that's a huge problem everywhere. Everybody, when you run sets, what do they automatically assume? That you maybe like that person more, or they're getting the good treatment and all those kind of things. But that's where you really got to break down to them that, it's more important. Every single person has to do their job in order for us to be successful,
Mm-hmm.
And make it important, like, and really explain it to them. Like, don't just tell them, hey, you screen here on this play and move on to the person that's going to score. Like, take the time to say, if you don't set this screen, okay, we will not score.
Yeah.
Like, this play will not work, and you are an important part to this. Because a lot of times they just want to know, like, you value them.
Sure.
Like, just because I'm not running the play for you to score every time doesn't mean I don't care. It doesn't mean I don't value you. It means that I think there's a mismatch on this particular person. And sometimes you do have to break it down. I think we get too caught up in just teaching the play, and really working with the person who's going to go score. No, you got to spend time with all of them and make sure everybody's on the same page of how important their role is.
Yeah, you don't want to be in a situation where players aren't feeling like they are a part of like a certain offense or they have a really role or a role, because then defenses are going to zero in on that, and they know, oh, this player's never going to touch the ball. If they touch the ball, they're not going to score. They're not even going to look to score. And then all of a sudden, like you're almost playing 4-on-5 at that point. If a player's just sort of like, this is all I sort of do, and they just kind of go through the motions and aren't about what they're doing. It's easy, I think, to plan against that person or try to bust what that person's doing, and then they're almost a non-factor offensively, especially if they're not committed to what they're supposed to be doing in the set.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, this goes back to what we said at the very beginning, that it's all about the relationships and stuff you build and the trust that you have. Because if there's a lack of trust or lack of relationship there, then that's exactly what will happen, is they will think that this play, you're just running it because you like this person. And no, it's never that case. It's because there's a mismatch that we like, as coaches, that's what our job is, to find where's the best mismatch where we can get a bucket. And I mean, once you get players that understand that and are bought into that, I mean, it's a special thing. It really is. I mean, it's fun to watch that kind of basketball versus I just want mine. I just want to get mine, and that's where we've grown a lot. I think we've really grown a lot in that area. We executing plays with purpose.
Excellent. And I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about, if we're going to talk about sets, what do you find best sorts of action, baseline out of bounds, you're looking to score, you're looking to get an easy quick bucket. What sort of actions and what sort of sets do you like to get a bucket under the basket, baseline out of bounds?
Well, for sure. I mean, like I said, we're facing 99% zone. So, I mean, our set, I kind of had to learn some different ones,
Yeah.
But we always run the classic, throw it to the corner, throw it back up, screen in for a three. I mean, every team runs that play pretty much, or a variation of it, where, you're going to throw it in and the inbounder's coming back out to that corner for the three. But it's funny how many teams can't defend it. It's still good. It's still open.
If it works, it works.
There's a reason everybody runs that play. But one other thing we do is we'll have our two guards on the blocks, and we'll have our two posts stacked at the free throw line. And it's very simple, but it works. I mean, our guards will fly out to the corners, calling for the ball. What happens is that bottom part of the zone will step out. Our posts flash to each block, and one of them is going to be open. It's a super simple play, but it took me explaining to my guards, you have to call for the ball. You can't just run to the corner because they're not going to move.
Gotta sell it.
But as soon as they start selling it, and they didn't, at first they think it's dumb or they look stupid, but once they start selling it, what happens? The defense starts moving with them, and you get layups. And I mean, especially like I told you, with our size that we have, I mean, they're going to score if they get the ball down there. So I mean, that's when I run a lot. And it's funny because they still struggle to guard it even when you run it. But I guess that's why those are good sets.
I mean, I guess that's why everybody's still running it, so to speak, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Before we hit our concluding couple questions, I did want to ask about the kind of the dynamic that happens where you have like this balancing act of running sets versus kind of trusting your players and kind of letting them have a little bit more freedom and be able to kind of just run based on what they see and what they feel. What is your kind of balance with that in terms of, using sets versus allowing your players some freedom to play? What's that been like for you throughout your coaching career, that balance you've had?
Well, when I played, like I said, we won a couple state championships, and I was a point guard, and I had full reign. Like, he would call plays, but I mean, 90% of the time I was calling something. You know what I mean? And because we had that trust. I was very lucky to play for him. He's a very good coach, but he trusted me to call a lot of stuff. And so I wasn't quite on that status last year. We were still learning, but the goal for me is I want to take slowly, like trust the process over time. I want to call less and less and less stuff. Like if that happens and my point guard or my guard there or my whoever it may be is calling stuff out, that's what I want. Like at the end of the day, I want them to identify it and call things out. That doesn't mean I'm not going to keep calling plays, but I would like to talk less and I want them to
That's the
talk
dream.
more. That's the dream, because then they understand. If they're calling the correct stuff, and if they are, then they get it. So the goal is this year, I hope we wean off it even more, that I can say fewer things about the offensive sets and those kind of things, because you want a player-led team. You can't have a coach-led team and win a championship. You got to have a player-led team, and that starts from the offensive end.
And you mentioned how your point guard was starting to call out some stuff this summer, start to call out some plays.
She was, and I was very excited. Well, because she kind of she gets them, like there's still a lot of room to grow, and that's where film study and everything else comes in. But I mean, she's really, her and a couple other guards are really starting to pick it up and understand. Like, okay, they're in a 2-3, we're going to run this, or they're in a 1-3-1, we're going to run this. Like, so there's still room to grow, but it was very exciting for me to see that. I'm about to yell something out and she calls it. I'm like, all right, well, that's the growth you want to see.
Yeah, less talking for you too, right? You don't have to talk so much.
Keep my voice a little bit longer.
As best as you can, right? Keep it a little bit longer. So, what advice would you give then to a coach coming in? They got sets, they got ideas. Since you just went through this process, what advice would you give to a coach coming in and they got their sets, they got their ideas down? What would you tell them to be mindful of or be aware of so that they implement their sets effectively?
I would say it's great. Like I did it, I told you, but it's great to have an idea of what you want to do. But don't be the coach that's so stubborn that I'm going to do this regardless. I think the biggest mistake probably a lot of young coaches are going to make is I want to do this because I love this offense or I love these sets, and it doesn't work for their team. So like for when I came in, I was a point guard, so I had tons of guard sets. It was all guard oriented. And we still have some, but I told you I have a 6-foot post and 4 other 5'10" posts, and it would make sense for me to get them the ball. So kind of humble yourself is probably the number one advice that I would give you regarding sets and offense is learn your team and then decide what exactly you're going to do, because you're going to have time to learn your team. If you get there before the summer, if you have some workouts in the fall, you're going to be able to learn them and then adapt. So continue adapting. Don't always stay in the same thing. I'm going to do this because it's what I want to do. I don't think that's the right way to coach. I think you have to change with your teams and change with who you have and personnel and everything else. So that's probably the number one advice is really humble yourself.
And that's going to be obviously coaching high school. That's going to be something you're always going to have to be going through that process in, is that you're always going to get new players. And eventually that post player is going to leave, and you might not have the same type of post player with that same skill set. And I think it's a easy trap to kind of fall in and kind of fall in love with your sets and want to run them regardless. But if the personnel changes, I think as a coach you have to make sure that what you're doing fits what players you got.
Exactly. I mean, me and my assistants are looking at it now, because last year we didn't have 5 girls over 5'10" and over. We had like 2, so this year we have 5, all that are very capable of playing. So we're not going to have there's going to be times where we have 2 posts on the floor. How do we do what sets can we run then? We've already sat down and we're going to continue talking about how can we maximize their success this year from last year. And we had a great season last year, but you got to tweak some things. You always got to tweak some things.
Yeah, you can't get complacent, especially now, because you're going to also probably face a situation where there's probably a lot of film on you now, or people might think that they know your sets or know what it is you're going to run because they got that film on you. And I think you're going to have some wrinkles. You're going to have some new things to kind of show them this coming year.
Absolutely, that's the fun part, and that's what you got to get your players excited about. When you're putting in new wrinkles and new stuff, it's like, hey, we got to do this because our stuff's so good. They're trying to cheat it. And you got to believe like this is why we're doing what we're doing. Goes right back to the why.
I love that. It's like they think they know, right? Like, yeah, that's an easy way to get them kind of excited is like you think they know, or they think that they know everything about you, what they're gonna do, but we're gonna switch it up on them. And I think players like that sort of thing. They like, trying to be like, oh, like you think you got me figured out? Like, all right, well, what about this then, sort of thing. And that's a fun way to introduce those new wrinkles that we talked about, is just kind of say like, hey, like, they think that they got you figured out, but what if we do this, or what else can we do to trick them or kind of confuse them even more?
Absolutely.
A lot of fun, lot of fun stuff there. To wrap up, Coach, a couple questions I ask every guest. So I'll go ahead and start with this first one, which is thinking back on your coaching career. What is a moment from your coaching career that you think others listening would be able to learn from?
I would say, yeah, for sure, especially a early like a first year coach, whether it be a first year head coach ever or just a first year to a program. I would say don't get discouraged early. I mean, because like for me, for our summer, I got there in May of last year. Obviously we weren't very good at what we did. We weren't good at our man-to-man. They never ran man-to-man. We weren't very good at our plays because they never really had a lot of plays. And we got killed. I mean, we were losing by 30, 40 points a bunch of games. But the thing was, and one of my coaching mentors is the boys coach at the school I'm at, Mez. And he told me early on, it was like 2 weeks into June, right when I got here, and he told me, just trust the process, relax. He's like, it'll be fine. You're doing it the right way. So you kind of got to trust yourself. Like we are doing it the right way. It's going to pan out, because what ended up happening is we continued working on it. We kept working every day. And the team, we had a team that beat us by 40 in June. We played them in the regular season. They were 4 times bigger than we are. We played them in the regular season, beat them by 15. So there's the growth. And you don't get discouraged early. Trust what you're doing and just keep working every day and just keep getting better, because I was discouraged for a little bit until I kind of talked to Mez and my assistants, and we calmed down and just kept grinding, and it works out. If you do things the right way, work hard, it will work out.
Hey, and that's a good plug to trust your assistants and listen to your assistants too, and make sure that you take what they say, because it's easy to want to blow things up right away. It's always nice to have somebody in your ear who can kind of level you out and reassure you that you're going about things the right way.
100% trust if you pick your assistants, you trust them, you have to listen to them. I mean, that would be the other thing. Yes, trust your assistants. I have great assistants, and I do a pretty good job of listening to them, but I can do an even better job because they just are going to see things that you miss. If you have good assistants, they're going to pick up on those things, and you got to trust them and listen to them, because if you don't trust them and listen to them, why do you have them there?
Yeah.
So don't humble. It goes right back to humble yourself.
Yeah. What do you, yeah, like that's why you want them there, right? They're going to be that other perspective that you might not have even considered, because it's really easy to get locked in to one way of thinking or see things one way. But it amazes me the way that other people can see things, or maybe like solve the answer to something that was really obvious, but like you just couldn't see it because you were just, I don't know, too in the weeds or something. I know I've had that happen many times, for sure. Awesome.
Yeah, get distracted.
Uh-huh. To wrap up, Coach, I give every guest what I call a 60-second soapbox. It's kind of your platform to get out like a final message, a final thought, a closing idea, something you just sort of leave the listeners with. It's entirely up to you how you want to take this or what direction you want to take it. So I'm just going to kind of open up and give you the floor, Coach, and I'm just going to kind of let you take it from here. So the floor is yours.
All right. Well, I would say, like, if I was going to leave one more thing or one more piece of advice to your listeners and everything, is really, really push the emphasis, especially in today's day and age when we have social media and we have fans that think they coaches from the bleachers are higher than ever, I would say, and all these different things, is really preach to your players the kind of the what's next attitude. You're not going to get drained because someone's yelling at you from the crowd. You make a mistake, you're not going to sulk. You have to preach what's next. And I bet we say that 50,000 times every day, because mistakes happen all the time in basketball. And sometimes we just we sit on them. We just continue to think about it. And then you hear the fans yelling. And then, so that's one thing we did a good job of, and we're going to keep doing a good job of, is keeping our player. We're a family. The whole team is together, and we don't care what anybody else says. We're not worried about mistakes. We're just going to keep playing hard. So that's the number one thing. And they can be confident because of the work you already did. You know, that's why you make a mistake, it don't matter, because I've already put in the work. So I know the next play is going to be better. You know, 1% better every single day. If we're doing that, you can play confident and don't worry about mistakes. So that's probably the big thing I would say is really get it into their head that it don't matter what a fan says or somebody else says, or, you know, whoever it may be. Trust yourself, trust the work you put in, and you'll be fine.
I like that one a lot. You know, there's a lot of noise out there, but I think, like you said, trust yourself and trust the family that you created with your team, and things will ultimately work out the way they should. I like that a lot. That was really well said. Appreciate you coming on, Coach. I feel like there's still more to talk about. I'll have to have you back on and talk more, so some X's and O's with you. But this was a lot of fun talking about sets, talking about your program, some culture, and some of the success that you had last year, and the stuff that you got going on this coming year as you keep building on what you're doing. Really cool that you had such a great year last year, and it looks like you have a great opportunity, you and the girls, to have an even better one next year. So, Coach Kingsbury, really appreciate you coming on. Best of luck to you and the girls next year, and have a great season.
Thanks for having me, Coach.
And thank you all for listening. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. We will see you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.